You just mentioned genocide in connection to the testimony of the three presidents. You also mentioned ethnic cleansing a little while earlier in connection with Jews and the Holocaust, and I'm pretty sure, I'm not an expert on these things, but Hamas's charter calls for the genocide of Jews, and something that I'm always hearing is that Israel is engaged in genocide and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. I'm wondering what truth there is behind this claim.
Well, the people who are making that charge are saying that sending 3,000 gunmen at a time of peace and a Jewish holiday on the Sabbath of Saturday, accompanied by 500 to 600 opportunistic civilians who just piled on, and killing 1,100 people and wounding over 4,000, and doing so in a deliberate fashion to terrorize the world's sensibilities. I mean, we haven't seen anything like that on the world stage, maybe at Darfur, but mutilating corpses, mass rape, decapitation, slaughtering infants, burning them alive, putting them in microwaves, all of that. And then sending 7,000 rockets into Jewish civilian areas. And then you juxtapose that with what the IDF is doing. The IDF is responding to what happened on October 7th. And the anger of the IDF is not that it's creating genocide, but it is more effective in its response than Hamas was in its offense. For example, had those 7,000 rockets, and we're probably up to 8,000 now as we speak, had there not been an Iron Dome, and had they hit all, they would have probably killed 2,000 to 5,000 Jews. Would anybody on the campus say that was wrong? No. When Israel replies, it sends text in some cases, drops leaflets, and warns people that they are being used as shields in mosques, hospitals, schools. There's 300 miles of tunnels, and therefore they should vacate. I know there's not a lot of alternatives to do so. It's exactly what we did when we bombed Japan. We dropped leaflets. There wasn't a viable way to vacate, but we said, this is what we're going to do. And so are they trying to? No, they're trying to reply to October 7th and destroy Hamas, and Hamas knows that. And that's why they took 243 captives hostage, because they're using them as shields. That's why they tunnel under the ground. They've spent billions of dollars in international and American and European money to do what? To help Hamas, help the people of Gaza to build their own desalination plants. The UN built one. Did they build more? Do they have an open border with Egypt because they don't threaten Egypt? No. And so I don't really take that too seriously. I regret the loss of life, but all that the bloodletting would stop tomorrow if Hamas just did the following. We're going to let the captives go, and we know the people who organized this murderous spree, and here they are. Here's their names, and we're not going to shield them. And please stop. The Israelis would stop in a minute if they turned over the ringleaders of Hamas, 2,000 or 3,000 of them, and they turned back the hostages. But they won't do that. As far as collective punishment, I mean, I haven't seen any widespread anger at what Hamas did among Gazans. As I said, hundreds followed them in there to join in on the murdering. They were told there were bounties for taking captives. When they brought bodies and captives back into Gaza, and you saw the videos of the reaction of the crowds, it wasn't disgust or even neutrality. It was to try to reach the captives or the corpses of dead Israelis and hit them or spit at them. When I looked at the latest polls, the popularity of Hamas has gone up threefold to 75% of the people who respond to these polls that often are conducted under the auspices of people on the West Bank or in the region that are no friends of Israel, it shows that there's 75% support of it. So I guess I'm left with a question: what is Israel supposed to do after October 7th? Say, we're sorry, we must have provoked you, we're sorry you decapitated all of our you baked kids and you mutilated and you cut off breast and you mass raped women and then you mutilated them, you tortured them. We're really sorry that we did something that you would make you so mad, and then we're just going to stop. Oh, by the way, and we'll go back to the issue of 1947 and we'll just make this all one big happy family. And you have a fine record of allowing Jewish citizens to live in Gaza. There's 20,000 Gazan laborers who come in every day at Israel. They make roughly the same wages as anybody else in Israel for manual labor, which is 4 times higher than Gaza. I don't think once Israel got out of Gaza, 2006, it's not occupied. They keep saying it's occupied, and it has a border with Egypt, another Arab country. And Egypt could easily open that border and do whatever they wanted with it, but it doesn't want to. There is a reason why it doesn't want to. It doesn't have anything to do with Israel, because they backed the Muslim Brotherhood that tried to overthrow the Egyptian government. And then when it was elected, it tried to do things that the Egyptians didn't think they wanted. They had a coup. So that was an internal Arab dispute. So I don't get the argument, is what I'm trying to say, about genocide, or that they're deliberately targeting. Every war has barbarities, but dropping leaflets and texting people to get out of the way when they're living on top of Hamas tunnels, or they're being used as human shields while they're sending rockets without any warning, deliberately targeted at Israeli civilian centers, in the context of what happened on October 7th, I don't see the Israelis are trying to do any genocidal thing. They're more effective at killing Hamas than Hamas is at killing them. And so that is disproportionate. But notice that we don't tell Ukraine, hey, when you hit a bridge in Crimea, we want you to text people and drop leaflets, because even though it's Russian occupied, there are a lot of people in that neighborhood that might be hurt. And oh, by the way, we don't want you to be disproportionate. We don't want to give you F-15s or Abrams tanks or HIMARS, because they're superior to what Russia has, and that would be disproportionate. Or we don't tell Zelensky, if you dare suspend an election or you dare call martial law, we're going to call you a fascist and we're going to drop all aid to you. We only do that with Israel. So it's a very different asymmetrical case.
Yeah, I did over the summer an over 2-hour episode, I think, with your colleague Norman Neymark on the world history of genocide. Yes. And we talked all about the communist genocides, the Mongolians, some of the African genocides, and the comparison that even if you believe, and there are many diverging stories in the media, but even if you believe the most severe of them, to compare what is happening in Gaza to the Holocaust, it just seems absurd.
It's obscene. And especially to raise that false comparison when the side that they're supporting, the protesters are supporting, has just killed more Jews and wounded more Jews in one day than any single day since the Holocaust, and deliberately was planning to do that. If they want to have a war with Israel, then they could have invaded, as they did in 73, the Egyptians and the Syrians. In the 73 Yom Kippur War, they had the same surprise. And by the way, this was timed 50 years to the Saturday from the Yom Kippur War. They caught the Israelis napping. They went in, the Egyptians and the Syrians. They had a conventional fight over strategic ground. There were some atrocities, and there were executions of a few Israeli soldiers and vice versa probably, but the war was not conducted against civilians. It was a conventional war. Hamas is willing to do that, but they don't. Or it's willing to make its cause to the Arab world, Jordan, Syria. They can say, look, we want to wipe off Israel off the map. Why don't we conventionally invade like you did in 73? For 4 days, you were victorious. They don't want to do that. They want to kill women and children and mutilate them and desecrate them. And then they want to claim victimhood at the same time. And when you put that in the perspective that they are recipients now under the Biden administration of resumption of U.S. aid, they get hundreds of millions of dollars from United Nations. The Gulf monarchies and the European EU probably well over $1 billion. And you look at what they've done with that money. They've got the most sophisticated subterranean city in the world, but it's only for a select few. They have the 4 or 5 top leaders of Hamas are billionaires ensconced in Qatar and Beirut. They could have easily had cheap, affordable housing, a modern transportation system, desalinization plants, plenty of water. They have offshore areas off Gaza. They could have had mutual consortia with Egypt or Israel and developed their natural gas rights. They could have done anything, but they didn't want to do that. It's a nihilist cause, it really is. And it's opportunistic here in the United States. It's why are these demonstrations breaking out? And it's because in the last 20 years, we've had tens of thousands of Middle Eastern students on Gulf scholarships. They often pay the full tuition, if not always. We've had Qatar, Saudi-funded Middle Eastern studies programs. At the same time, we've seen a radical drop in Jewish enrollment, Jewish American enrollment. It used to be 25 to 30% of the Ivy League in places like Stanford. But under the new proportional representation affirmative action statutes or protocols prior to George Floyd, but after George Floyd, what you would call repertory admissions. In the case of Stanford, as you know, on the Stanford website, they give you an ethnic breakdown of the incoming admitted class, and it says 20% white. And with the abolition of SAT scores and probably competitive ranking of GPAs based on the quality of the high school education, it's very, very hard for a white male, and especially Jewish students, to come. So their numbers have plummeted. At the same time, Middle Eastern students have increased their profile. At the same time, the so-called woke movement has made people especially receptive to this Palestinian cause. And the result of it is something that no one ever thought would happen in the United States. Nobody ever thought that the president of Harvard could not at least say that people who call for the destruction of Israel and the genocide of the Jewish people would be subject to the same type of statutes that she applies if you say the wrong pronoun or you say something untoward about a marginalized group like blacks, Latinos. And they have been expelled. There's been people put on suspension. There's been admissions that were withdrawn at all these schools for just that stuff. And yet, in the case of Israel and Jewish students, they make a special exception. I don't know why that happened. It wouldn't have happened 20 years ago, but I think it reflects the vast changes in the student body and faculty profile of the last 10 or 15 years.